Hi, I'm really excited to publish the first Future Here interview. And what better topic to start the interview series with than with Europe's fastest supercomputer called LUMI, which means snow in Finnish. The LUMI supercomputer is currently Europe's fastest and the world's third fastest supercomputer. It is also fully powered by renewable hydropower and also heats the local town it is situated in Finland. It has the staggering computational power of roughly 1.5 million consumer laptops. LUMI will be used to calculate, among other things, climate and language models. I recently had the opportunity to visit CSC's office and interview the Director of Science and Technology and a climate strategist working on the climate digital twin. You'll learn much more about these and a lot more in the interview, so let's jump right in. Hi, so today on the Future Here show, we're really glad to have Pekka Manninen and Jenni Kontkanen. You're both working with the LUMI supercomputer in Finland, right? Could you please tell a bit about yourselves and introduce yourselves to the audience?
So hello, I'm Pekka Manninen. I'm the Director of a unit Science and Technology at CSC, and also the Director responsible of the LUMI supercomputer.
Great. Good to have you here, Pekka. And Jenni?
Hello, I'm Jenni Kontkanen. So I work at CSC as a climate strategist. So this means that I'm responsible for different climate research related projects.
Great to have you here. So today we're going to discuss the LUMI supercomputer and supercomputing in general. Also, we're going to discuss the climate digital twin that you're working on, Jenni. And then also, it would be really interesting to hear about your personal backgrounds and how you got inspired and enthusiastic about science and technology and what enabled you to take this career path in general. Let's start off with science in general and the LUMI supercomputer. So what is the LUMI supercomputer in practice, Pekka?
The LUMI supercomputer is the fastest supercomputer in Europe, the third fastest in the world at the moment. And of course, supercomputer is something that is kind of a computer, but at the same time it is an instrument for scientific research and something you should compare to a telescope or particle accelerator and so on. And the idea is to enable cutting-edge research based on modeling, data analysis, artificial intelligence, and so on.
Really interesting. And Jenni, could you give a brief description about what the digital twin project is and how it utilizes the LUMI supercomputer's resources?
So this climate digital twin, it's part of European Commission's program called Destination Earth. And this is a very ambitious program which aims to develop a digital twin of Earth by the end of this decade. And in practice, this will be done so that there will be different thematic digital twins developed. And in the end, they all will be integrated into this one digital twin of Earth. And now we at CSC are leading a development of climate digital twin, which is one of the first digital twins developed within this Destination Earth program. And we will do this together with 12 other organizations based on a contract that we have made with European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, so ECMWF. And very briefly, this climate digital twin, it's a new type of modeling system that will provide information on local impacts of climate change. So we will, in a new way, combine these high-resolution climate simulations to a set of impact models, and this makes it possible to evaluate the impact of climate change on different topics. So, for example, on wildfires or wind energy or river flows. These are some examples on applications that we have now in this climate digital twin.
And how does that fit with the physical resources that the computer provides? I mean, it probably naturally requires enormous mathematical capabilities to crunch that data, but just briefly, how does it fit in with the resources at hand, and how was this project picked for the Finnish research part?
You are exactly right that we wouldn't be able to do these very high-resolution climate simulations that we are planning to do with this climate digital twin without these very fast state-of-the-art supercomputers like this LUMI that we have now in Finland. And this was one of the reasons why also we at CSC were chosen to lead this project, as we have currently the LUMI in Finland. We are operating it, and we have a lot of expertise in handling the LUMI, because it's not so straightforward to get all these climate models to work on these very new supercomputers.
I'd like to also add there that in fact this is not the Finnish computing resources, but this comes from the European Commission. This is resourcing the computational time for the Destination Earth initiatives.
Yeah, great. Thanks for adding that, Pekka. And we'll discuss the resources of the computer, and it's an immense machine for both the calculation and the power requirements, and that power is renewable energy, which is of course great. But going just a bit kind of backwards into how you landed in these roles. So Pekka, could you tell about your professional history, how you got interested about computing and how it ties into the role that you're now in?
So I kind of knew quite young age already that I want to be a scientist as an adult, and basically everything teach through high school, junior high, senior high is basically targeting that. And I studied theoretical physics in university, got my PhD on that topic, and enrolled on a research career until I was running my own research group in molecular quantum mechanics, or manipulative quantum mechanics. But there was still kind of a tipping point in the career that I realized that the supercomputers I was doing my research, that were involved all the time in my research, and I was more and more going towards the kind of algorithm development and the software development for the scientific software development. So at some of the time I was just realizing that I'm more interested in the computing platforms than the phenomena I was studying. So it was quite natural to jump on the other side of the table, and I came to CSC, the Finnish Computing Center, to work here for the first time in 2007. And I've been here, did a short stint or a couple of years in a supercomputer vendor in between, but rejoined CSC later on. And I've been doing different specialist positions, so I've been helping researchers to optimize their codes. I'm just like a high-performance computing specialist. I've been leading a group for science support, and then now for the last couple of years I've been leading the LUMI, the deployment of the acquisition and the design, acquisition, deployment of the LUMI computer and its operations, and now in the new role in a more general science and technology director.
Sounds really interesting.
So, like I said, I've been using supercomputers from the very beginning of my research career, from basically day one. So the first summer job I got at the university was the first day was to get CSC accounts, and I've been using many generations of CSC machines ever since. So yeah, it's been basically always there for myself. So quite soon in the studies, I understood that basically everything that is in theoretical physics, that everything that can be done with the pen and paper have been done already decades ago, and basically all our research, our physics research, is about of massive data or generating massive amount of data with big compute power.
Yeah, understandable. So the computers are the new pens in some sense, that we need that crunching power to be able to make progress in science.
Any new discoveries, and especially what comes to natural science in general.
Yeah, great. And how about you, Jenni, your history and how you got excited about science and technology?
So if I also start from the time when I was a kid, so I have always enjoyed being outdoors and in the nature. So even as a kid, I was interested in understanding kind of what happens in the nature, like all kind of stuff, like why there are thunderstorms or why there are certain type of clouds and so on. So then I guess at school at some point I realized that kind of if you study science, you get answers to these questions. And then I ended up studying atmospheric sciences at the University of Helsinki, and then also did a PhD also at University of Helsinki in atmospheric physics. And after that, I was a researcher, mostly also at University of Helsinki. My study was focused on atmospheric airflow particles. And so I was doing some modeling on how they are forming from vapors in the atmosphere, and also then analyzing some observational data. But then a bit more than 1 year ago, so at the end of 2021, think I saw this open position at CSC for a climate strategy, and I thought that this is a good opportunity to also widen my scope. So because of course I had been doing research on quite narrow topic for a long time, so I wanted to do something that has a bit like wider impact. And since then I have been at CSC and now heavily involved in these different digital twin projects, so especially this climate digital twin.
Then Pekka, I had a look at your LinkedIn profile while doing some background research for the interview, and you state on your LinkedIn profile that you're a supercomputing geek, and as you mentioned, your background is heavily focused on supercomputing. Specifically, how does it feel to get your hands on working on this type of computer? I mean, you're wielding massive amounts of calculating power, but it must in a way feel like any typical operating system. It runs on Linux, right? But there's immense underlying power. So describe kind of how it feels in practice to get your hands on that kind of capabilities to run your research on.
Yeah, you're right. So starting using a supercomputer doesn't go like you would imagine from TV or something. So it is going to be like a terminal screen and a blinking cursor when you log into the system, and then you are supposed to start typing Unix commands and then start compiling your software there. So of course, as a user experience is not very flashy. But I mean, yes, I'm a supercomputing geek in a sense that I really follow the technology while I've been designing different supercomputer architectures or supercomputer installations, including LUMI, planning already the next generation of LUMI at the moment, and but the next supercomputing installations. And of course, been heavily hands-on involved on making supercomputer applications, optimizing them, making new programming models, and so on and so on. But of course, the kind of like big computers and the kind of like how fast you get something solved is something that's just thrilling. But at the same time, they are just instruments to get the results. And obviously, where the biggest kick is that what we can achieve with the systems.
Definitely. So it becomes more like a tool.
Because it is a tool in the tool chain for scientific discovery.
Yeah. How about you, Jenni? Are you now in practice already running your calculations for the climate digital twin on the supercomputer?
So yes, our team working on this climate digital twin are just now currently running the third simulations of LUMI. So this project started in the 1st of September, and since that we have been working hard on really get these models run on LUMI, and now we are at the point where we are at the first time able to run these simulations and are very excited about that.
However, even if I talk about running a supercomputer and so on, I need to admit that the stuff I mostly do is related to giving presentations on PowerPoint or looking at budgets on Excel or writing short pieces of email. So I've been mostly in the management for many years now. So the kind of hands-on work with supercomputers have been quite unfortunately scarce.
Hands-off in a way, but this is what management is, isn't it? Okay, going to the actual infrastructure of the computer, and the LUMI supercomputer is now ranked as one of the fastest in the world, the third fastest to be more specific, right, and the fastest supercomputer in Europe. It's also one of the greenest supercomputers in the world. Could you, Pekka, please tell us more about the technology and architecture of the LUMI computer? Why does it have this particular tech setup? Is it related to the budget specifically, or is it the current state of the art and that was able to be deployed for the computer, just so that we can know more about the actual architecture of the computer?
Yes, the motivations are both. So what we wanted to achieve was, because we had a given budget, so we had like a certain amount of money for the building the system and operating it. But we wanted to achieve very high number crunching power and at the same time very high number crunching power per watt, so energy efficiency. So we had, of course, sustained application performance in mind. So the speed from the storage to the compute needed to be very high. Also the usefulness, and we wanted to have a kind of future-proof system that is not just like a one-trick pony, but in a way to kind of a Swiss Army knife for a wide range of scientific disciplines. So we want to have like a build a system where you can like pull up some kind of a corkscrew or knife for pretty much all the workflows that the scientists will have in this decade. And as an outcome of these considerations and optimizations and the procurement itself, we ended up in a configuration where the number crunching is done in two, we call partitions. So there's a bit over 10,000 GPUs. So like a processors meant for scientific computing, but based on the graphics processing units that I'm familiar from the PCs. So they have a very high, this kind of like a flops per watt ratio, much higher than like a general purpose x86 CPUs. Then we have a partition for like a multi-core x86 for workflows, codes that just are not fit for the GPU architectures. And one can kind of run on the GPUs or the CPUs or combine them for the same workflow. And then LUMI has a set of different kind of I call them spices. So there's a whole kind of utilities that makes the scientific work and workflows possible. So there's a big partition for data analytics and visualization and so on. There are different platforms for running microservices for orchestrating data in and out from the system and then hook it to the, say, observations or experimental instruments and so on. LUMI has a connection to quantum computers, so to kind of be in a way forward-looking on that one. But everything still is a one environment, one computing environment. Everything's accessible from the single login and a single login environment and supported by, of course, the necessary storage resources.
Sounds really interesting. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, so and the technology partner here is Hewlett-Packard Enterprise under the Cray brand, so the legendary supercomputer vendor that HPE purchased some years ago. And the main technology partner is also AMD, that all the other CPUs, GPUs in the system are through AMD technology.
How did the global supply chain crunch affect you? Did you have any kind of changes to the initial setup or delays in the timeline related to COVID and this whole supply chain ripple for computer parts?
Well, of course, we weren't immune. We started the procurement of the system in late November 2019. And everybody knows what happened during that. So we hit COVID crisis. We got the global microelectronics supply chain hiccups. We hit the war in Europe and so on. So basically all possible, this kind of unforeseen risks were suddenly materializing during the course of work. And obviously for the supply chain issues, the system was installed like more than half a year later than anticipated.
But now, most importantly, the computer is running. You're able to run the projects. How does the processing power work in general? Are you ramping up the processing power kind of bit by bit, or when the computer is physically assembled, you can start running it at full throttle, so to speak, in terms of the processing power? Could you discuss that?
It's ready when everything was installed, and then it's kind of considered to be ready. So we are not ramping up it anymore. Everything is there in Kajaani up and running, and the idea is that now one can run anything between single node to a full system on the. It's modular, but still they are kind of still very tightly connected blocks, and that are meant to work as a single unit.
Great. And related to the fact of it using renewable energy, and you mentioning that the architecture is also built around the capabilities of calculations per watt, and then the power available is a massive power hog, isn't it? Over 220 megawatts, if I'm right. Could you discuss about how that is produced then?
So LUMI itself is a nominal power drain is 8 megawatt or so, and basically the observed, unlike a measured power drain, is roughly 5 megawatts. But the site we are running, LUMI, is capable of hosting all the way to 200 something megawatts, as it is a former paper mill, where the paper machines are like a beast that consume the 200 megawatts of electricity. But the paper production has gone to Latin America, but the site remains, so all the electricity is there and beyond where the paper machines used to be. So we are basically benefiting from the existing infrastructure.
Great.
But the system itself is capable of hosting IT capacity up to 10 megawatts.
And what about the waste heat that is also utilized for heating the municipality in Kajaani, right? So how is that distributed?
Yeah, so also the good thing about the site is that the kind of a heat factory. So in here in the Nordics, we heat up houses by circulating hot water through the so it's centrally warmed and then pushed to the basically throughout the houses in the more dense urban areas. So here this heat factory happens to be in 200 meters from where LUMI is. So we just built a pipe to that factory. So with the heat exchangers, we are basically able to give our excess heat, which is basically our waste. So we would just let it outside the air, but this time we can just capture it because it's like a water cooled. We have this kind of like a warm water coming out from the system from the cooling loop. So we can connect that to the heat factory supply lines and then push it to the Kajaani district heating system.
Sounds like a good location to host a supercomputer. Okay.
Maybe I can add here that because of this use of waste heat and the use of renewable energy, of course, the carbon footprint of LUMI operations is smaller than normally for supercomputers. And now when we are working in these projects like Climate Digital Twin, where we want to work towards reaching these climate goals of Europe and Finland, then it makes sense to use a supercomputer like LUMI.
Yeah, it was like a real consideration of designing the destination. So basically how much we can afford to have carbon dioxide emissions to study the climate change. So basically the medicine cannot be more harmful than the disease in a way that's why it is important. So how what kind of systems we use for the climate or the destination Earth purposes. And the supercomputers, as we talk about, made lots of energy, so they are not kind of like a insignificant. The LUMI's excess heat that we use for the district heating, it's an equivalent of like removing 4,000 cars from the traffic as a CO2 footprint, but how much the local energy company is able to cut down their fossil fuel consumption because of the heat. And you can kind of like take a numbers there. So basically running one big job on a supercomputer is equivalent of driving like hundreds of kilometers on a car or taking a flight, or just your kind of like a flight footprint of like taking a European flight for running a single job. So we are not talking about like a insignificant CO2 emissions, and hence this kind of like a fully carbon neutral operations, I think, extremely important for big supercomputers.
Really good point, and nice to hear that that's the kind of motive and mandate that you have for the energy use. Okay, LUMI's second pilot phase for nearly 30 research projects started in November 2022. What kind of project applications have you received for the utilization of LUMI? Could you please discuss what kind of research applications you have received and how these are going to be now put in practice?
At the moment, so like I said, we are through the piloting phase and we are in production now. So on the pilot phase, we had roughly 30 projects across Europe for it, and varying from many scientific disciplines. So from language technology to cosmology to engineering and so on. So there were many scientific domains on the pilot use, and the early projects are following the same pattern. So at the moment, I would say that our biggest resource consumers are, in fact, language processing. So different kind of artificial intelligence, molecular dynamics, computational fluid dynamics, and electron structure theory.
How long is the operational lifespan of LUMI intended to be?
So as we've been now discussing, we are finally getting to the kind of like a horizontal flight mode. So we are in the full production, more or less. There will be some changes to the system still during the spring, but anyway, so we are quite close to the final system. And supercomputers tend to have at the end of the day, quite short spans. So LUMI is envisaged to be operated to late 2027.
Understandably, and of course, due to Moore's law, the progress is very fast.
So one of that there will be a crossover when it does not make sense anymore to feed on the old systems. Of course, Moore's law is not a law of nature. It is a bunch of people working hard. So far it has been continuing, and it's been the rule of thumb has been that there's just like after 6-7 something like that years, there will be like a tipping point where it's just like a more beneficial of moving to the next architecture instead of like just like keeping the old system still alive.
Understandably. What happens to old supercomputers?
They are dismantled, they are recycled, so different metals are taken out, and so they are recycled to like just raw materials.
Great. Then going back to Jenni, the Destination Earth project, would be interesting to hear about the actual research process, what you're researching specifically, and what kind of calculations and models and the amount of data that includes. Could we discuss that?
Okay, so in this climate digital twin, we are using 2 system models. They are called ICON, and IFS is the other model. There is 2 different ocean models, so it's IFS Nemo and IFS Feson. Those are the models that we are using. They are already existing climate models, but in this project, we are optimizing them to work on these new supercomputers. Our idea is that we stream the output of these climate simulations to a set of these different impact models. So this is a very new approach and something that is not done traditionally in climate research. So traditionally, climate research has been done so that you run the climate simulations, then you store them up somewhere on disk, and then these people who are doing these impact assessments, they can download the data, and they have these impact models that they are using, and then they use these simulations to run their impact assessments, and they get some knowledge of the certain impact of climate change, depending on what kind of model they are using. But now then in this project, we will like real-time stream the data, this climate simulation data, to these different applications. So this enables these applications to have this access to always the latest climate simulation results. And this also, because this, as you also mentioned, this amount of this data from these climate simulations is huge. It can be like petabytes, or it is petabytes of data. So with the streaming, it also enables that we don't need to store all the data. So we can just have it for some time there for the applications to get it, and then it can be removed. Of course, we will also store some part of this data permanently so that it can be used later. But the idea is that with this new approach, we don't need to store all the simulation data.
So in practice, going a bit more deep into the actual data, is it historical climate and weather data that you extrapolate to give kind of future projections of how the weather or climate will change? Is that in practice what the source data and the projection?
Not exactly. So climate models, they include these equations that describe the climate system. So different parts of the system like atmosphere, what happens in the atmosphere, then also ocean and also the land surface. And of course, they consider how much solar radiation is absorbed in the Earth system. And that's why as input in the climate models, you actually have these different factors that affect this solar radiation. So how much solar radiation is absorbed in the Earth. So in practice, this means that as input to climate models, you have factors like how much you have greenhouse gases, how much you get solar radiation, what kind of land surface you have, because that affects how much radiation is collected back to the space. And then based on all this information, then when you have this equation that describe how the air moves, for example, in the atmosphere and so on, you can really calculate the state of the atmosphere. So actually, we use observational data only to validate our models. We don't kind of extrapolate based on the observational data, but we really have this equation that will tell us the state of the atmosphere. And so, but to validate the models, we perform simulations not only to the future, but also to the past. So we run simulations, for example, starting a couple of decades ago until this day. And then from this time period, we have these observations existing. So then we are able to compare our modeling results to these observations, and we are able to see that if our models, how close our models are to these observations. And then this will give us some confidence also then when we run these simulations for the future and predict that what will happen for the climate in the coming decades, that how reliable our climate simulations are.
And this, in a sense, then is traditional mathematical functions, right? It's not utilizing artificial intelligence or neural networks to kind of find patterns. You already have those equations, and it's a vast amount of mathematical data that you're then running to actually get the results or projections, right?
Exactly. Although, of course, at the moment, there's a lot of research on how these different AI methods could be also used in climate modeling. AI methods could be used so that we, for example, don't need to store all the climate simulation data, that we store it only certain snapshots of the data, and then we use these AI methods to extrapolate between these snapshots that we have stored. So this could be, for example, one possible use. But now what I'm talking about, or what I was explaining, yeah, you were right. They are based on these traditional physics equations. So to clarify, these our simulations, they are produced by solving these physics equations. So in that sense, they are not based on some observational data, but this simulation data that I'm talking about, it's the result of these equations solved. So in addition, I want to still mention when discussing digital twins, they don't only include simulation data, but in the concept of digital twin, you also utilize real-time observations usually, and then often also some AI methods to complement these model simulations.
And when you say real time, does it mean observational data from the same day as you run the calculations, or how real time are we talking?
Okay. Maybe I can explain what digital twins usually mean, because this climate digital twin it's a bit different. So digital twins are actually used quite a lot in the industry, for example. The idea is that you have digital copy of some real life object or process, and then you update this digital twin based on observations that you are collecting real time from this real physical object. So for example, if some companies, they can have a digital twin of their factory, and then they are all the time monitoring what is happening in the factory, and then they are updating this digital twin, and they can use this to monitor and simulate different processes. But in this climate digital twin, we are not using actually real-time data to update the digital twin at the moment, but like I explained earlier, the role of the observational data is in validating the simulations.
How about the real-world use of that data? What will the digital twin model be utilized for?
So the goal of the whole Destination Earth program is to develop this digital twin of Earth to support decision making, and this is also something for which this climate digital twin is meant for. So the idea is that this climate digital twin can be used to, for example, test different scenarios. So what happens if we don't reduce our CO2 emissions? What kind of impacts it can have on different regions in Europe? Also, what kind of effects different mitigation actions can have? So what if we, for example, plant a forest in some area, what kind of effect it can have? So this is the goal of the whole Destination Earth program, to have this digital twin to support decision making.
And what does that timeline look like now that you've been running the research for the first few months? When will this start to be used for decision making?
That's a good question. So as I already said, we started the project in November last year. And the first version of the digital twin, climate digital twin, should be ready by the end of April next year. However, then this Destination Earth program continues until the end of this decade, or actually 2030. So I cannot yet give any exact timeline for this, that when is it really the digital twin there in the use of policymakers. But I would say that it will be towards the end of this decade. So because there is first a lot of work in really developing these new systems.
Definitely. Sounds really interesting. Okay, Pekka, then there's also projects that LUMI is running that are more related to artificial intelligence and neural networks. One project working on natural language recognition, or maybe multiple. Could you discuss these projects in depth and how LUMI is utilized?
Yes, indeed. So artificial intelligence, and especially those involving deep neural networks, have basically where the kind of this like a revolution or like a surge of AI to everybody's attention is mostly due to the amount of data, amount of credit data we have, and also amount of computing power we have for those models. So the algorithms itself have been known for many years, or the concept of neural networks and the deep neural networks. But now when they come together with the communities, HPC community and AI community kind of like come together, then we have like a scene the kind of like a fast take up of AI, or kind of an AI coming like a really useful and even intelligent. So yes, I think AI is one of the key use cases for LUMI, and then many other of the leading supercomputing installations. And the GPUs, the GPU architectures have been observed to be very good for AI workloads. And therefore, I think LUMI will be one of the leading platforms in the world for AI.
Yeah.
And then so AI is very useful for many things in science. So I mentioned language technology already. So for improving language models. Also, well, everybody has had like a connection to this chat GPT bot, which is basically we are training the same language models for many different languages at the very moment on LUMI. So also I think what we want to achieve is a kind of a democratization of those models, so they're kind of closed source at the moment. So nobody really knows what this OpenAI, this part of the name is really doing for the chat GPT. But for understanding those models and understanding related sort of language models, how they build up and so on, it's a kind of a very active and one of the key research topics on LUMI at the moment. But it's not the only place. So AI is as highly useful as this kind of a data analysis method. So it's very good on finding this kind of like golden nuggets out of like a vast amount of data. So it's able to see correlations and to spot anomalies that human is in fact not able to do, or even like our more traditional ways of analyzing data is not able to catch. So AI or DNN-based methods are extremely useful for reanalyzing existing data sets, observational simulation data sets, or on-the-fly analysis of like simulations, because this kind of a very large-scale simulations produce vast amounts of data, but you can kind of have this kind of on-the-fly analysis in many fields with AI to find the kind of like a points of interest from on that data.
So maybe I can add here. So as an example, we could use some AI methods to detect some interesting events also from this climate simulation data. So for example, to find something that we wouldn't notice without the AIs. So for example, detect some extreme event happening somewhere, like a storm developing or something like that.
Great, good practical example. And just to get back to the actual terminology or the acronym you, Pekka, mentioned, DNN, so is that deep neural network?
Yes,
the term.
Yeah. With like lots of this kind of hidden layers between the input and the output layer of the
Great. And you also mentioned that LUMI has access to a quantum computer. Could you discuss this further?
So quantum computing is something that there's quite a lot of fuss and hype around. And it's a kind of like a all new way of doing computing. So it's not a fast computer. It's never going to be a fast processor for computing. It's just a physics experiment apparatus that one basically can harness the real world of quantum mechanics to do something that we kind of use computing for in a kind of like a different way. So it's, for instance, I think the first use cases for quantum computing will be in fact to simulate quantum computers or quantum systems in general. So that's basically a very, very hard computational problem, but basically we kind of have the apparatus to like represent itself. So it's something that we can do, and it's a kind of becoming from basic research into an engineering question. So there's many things we know already how to harness quantum mechanics, or the very the smallest word for things, and now it's becoming from theory to like an engineering problem. And there are real world quantum computers, few qubit systems, and we have built the connection to two of them, one in Finland, one in Sweden, with the idea that we have like a quantum programming environment on LUMI, so one can design the like quantum algorithms and then test them on like a classical computer, like a simulating or like emulating to be a quantum computer. You can see how the algorithm behaves, and then you can like a benchmark it or test it with like a real world quantum computers. So that's the idea. So at the moment, the quantum computers or the quantum computing partition is mostly this kind of like a research quantum algorithm research platform.
Fascinating, and definitely sounds like a whole new episode topic for the audience. We already discussed the use of the climate digital twin and how that utilizes LUMI's resources. And could you tell us an example of how supercomputers have been used to model and predict the impacts of climate change?
Yes, so actually supercomputers have always been used in climate research. So of course it has changed. So a couple of decades ago, supercomputers were simpler than the LUMI that we have nowadays. But already then, it was the state-of-the-art supercomputers that were used for climate simulation. Because I think I mentioned already earlier how climate is a very complex system. It includes the atmosphere, land surface, ocean. And that's why also climate models are very complex. And that's why we couldn't really do climate research without these supercomputers. And that's why we can also think that thanks to the supercomputers, we have now this knowledge that we have on how much the global temperature has increased during the last decades, and also how much we should now decrease these CO2 emissions to avoid it increasing even further in the future.
And unfortunately, it's the correlation between the CO2 increase in the atmosphere and the impact on the future climate has been known for many decades. It's been visible on the models from since late 80s or something. So it's been really known in science, and it's been just like obvious on the simulation. So what's going to happen? But unfortunately, this information hasn't so far led to the concrete actions to do anything or like doing enough for stopping the process of the CO2 emissions. But this is something that the research community has known for decades, and it's been obvious from the models what happens even from that time and that computing power that was available back then.
Great that we're making the progress, and like you mentioned, also unfortunate that then there were these blockers in society that we weren't able to maybe utilize that research data that your colleagues had formerly. Okay, discussing kind of like how you see supercomputing changing in the future. What kind of progress do you see that supercomputing will have in the next 5 to 10 years, and how that maybe intertwines with similar climate models in the future? Maybe you can, Pekka, discuss how you see supercomputing will evolve in the next 5 to 10 years, and Jenni, you can answer how you see that tying into your field of research.
So I bet there will be lots of this kind of more of the same things. So there are many resemblance of the current supercomputers to supercomputers 20 years or even 30 years ago. So maybe even this same programs, of course, modernized, but still sort of like as a part of this kind of a steady evolution, are still being used. So there's basically nothing that would like make this kind of like an insight that would like turn somehow the table around and like have a reboot on this. So there will be like we're going to see more computing power. We are going to see more powerful these compute units, perhaps combined in like larger quantities. So there will be just like this specs are going to be growing. So if we talk about now on the exascale systems, so there will be post exascale in roughly on the more slow style phase. But of course, many new things arising there. There are new compute technologies that we will learn to utilize. And how I see is that we are going to go more and more into this kind of a heterogeneity on the computer architecture. So runtimes will be smarter and being able to combine on like a different kind of plethora of like a different looking resources. So we will have this kind of accelerators not only for like a linear algebra like GPUs are, but for different things. And so we're going to see systems that have like a many different kind of flavors of resources and a very smart runtime that's able to sort of like use them in unison for a given workflow. So I think that's going to be the future trend in supercomputing.
So in practice, you mean that will include CPU calculations, GPU, and then maybe these quantum style kind of parallel computing.
Let's see about the quantum, but at least we're going to see like a specifics meant for just for one operation to like optimize like a power processors for like something very specific, or perhaps different flavors from CPU. So they may be like a more memory bandwidth and or more like a floating point in the CPU architectures in the same soup, and then we combine them for the good combination out of them for the flow that is being fed in by a researcher.
Really interesting. And Jenni, how do you see kind of in your field of research supercomputing changing climate change or climate models, say in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I believe that in the coming years, we will improve the resolution of the climate simulation even further. So in traditional climate models, the spatial resolution can be around like tens of kilometers. But now in this climate digital twin, we aim for the resolution of down to like 5 kilometers first, and then even closer to 1 or 2 kilometers. And this really enables us to then know what kind of impacts climate change have in really small scale. So what happens inside a certain city, for example, while the traditional climate models were able to tell only what happens on average in this larger region. So, and to be able to do this higher resolution climate simulation, we need these faster and faster supercomputers that Pekka was also talking about.
And related to what Pekka mentioned about kind of researchers already having a consensus 30, 40 years ago about how the climate is changing, and do you believe that with increasing data and better models, we're able to finally find a consensus about how the climate is changing and act on it? Do you think that we've been missing the data, or that it's more a policy issue in a way?
Yeah, I would think that it's not about the data that we would have been missing, but I hope that these kind of new tools like this digital twin, it can make it even more concrete what kind of impact climate change can have on a local scales. And this hopefully can then also influence then policy making.
Hopefully it does. So Pekka, you kind of discussed how you see that LUMI already utilizes different types of resources and how that will increasingly be so in future supercomputing. But just so that we understand in layman terms, how do you say that how much does modern supercomputing already rely on neural networks versus modeling massive purely mathematical formulas? And how is that balance utilized? It probably also depends on the project or research at hand, right?
Yeah. So the bit different question here. So the hardware, the neural networks are software algorithms. So it does not have much to do with the hardware part of the system. So what I really see, like we already discussed on the kind of a search of AI. So I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. So we have seen there's like a very nice results from many fields of traditional simulation where we know the equations and we just develop them in time to have this kind of like a small scale digital twin in a sense. So we have like a chemical reaction or something. We just like know the equations that describe and govern the thing, and then we just like move on those differential equations in time. And so that's simulation. So we have seen that it's possible to train neural networks with, say, experimental data that like reaches the same accuracy of the methods by just this kind of no physics models. So it's just like a trained data that the neural network just like learns from the training data, the phenomena so well that we can replace or complement where we have used the simulation before. So I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. So simulation will be there. There will be cases where it is impossible to sort of learn from the past is not so regular that we can for any amount of historical data we can train a network that would be able to predict the future. Weather is a good example. So and there won't be a neural network that would be able to predict weather, for instance. So it's so chaotic that this is impossible to capture. So sort of what governs how weather forms. So that's a good example that won't ever happen. But there are, for instance, on chemistry. So it is possible to with experimental chemical data to train a network that reaches the same accuracy as quantum mechanical methods in chemistry. So that progress we're going to see.
Maybe something close to what DeepMind's AlphaFold was able to now do in terms of protein folding.
Yeah, protein folding is also a good example. So it's something that we probably, it is very few proteins we've been able to simulate on a molecular dynamics. So we just put the atoms and develop them in a Newtonian mechanics, this molecular dynamics. So protein folding is something, so that it's sort of so many configurations it can fold to. That is basically impossible to get the kind of the most obvious trajectory from those. Or it's not impossible, but it's so expensive that you're not able to sort of develop the system in time long enough that it would happen anything on the protein, because we are talking about nanoseconds on there, and everything happens in micro or even milliseconds on proteins. So, but they have been like you mentioned, there are very promising results from neural networks where you can get protein foldings with the accurate prediction on the folded shape of a protein. So that is a very good example.
Yeah. Okay, one audience question was that how do you recognize any limitations with the models that the LUMI computer is able to calculate, and maybe that are already beyond the physical capabilities of LUMI? Of course, that must be a never-ending research of fitting your research needs and models into the physical capabilities, but anything that you could discuss?
Indeed. So we at the moment, so the driving factor of building faster supercomputers is of course science. To motivate the building of LUMI and its generation of supercomputers, there were tens and tens of scientific problems where we basically knew the question, we know the answer, a solution algorithm. We even may have had the software, but we just run out of the kind of a computational power to run it to the sufficient fidelity. And that's not going to change. So there's still beyond LUMI scale. LUMI will solve many of them, but they will be either new generated or something remaining for the future generations. And for instance, the simulations that Jenni described are kind of on the limit of LUMI's capability. So we're pushing it to the basically very limit. So it won't be ever a routine platform for doing routinely those high fidelity global climate simulations. So that's something for the future generation systems to really do.
Great. Any closing remarks, and who would you like to know about your respective research in general? Who would you, Jenni, like to know about your research with the climate digital twin?
I would say all Europeans, because actually we aim the aim of the Destination Earth program is that these Destination Earth services, which include then in the future also this climate digital twin, that they are aimed at different types of users. So for researchers and experts, but also for policymakers and even normal European citizens, so that all these would be able to utilize these digital twins developed within Destination Earth.
Great. And Pekka, how about you? Who would you like to know more about your research or LUMI supercomputing?
Obviously, I would like to see that many scientific domains and scientific communities would be aware of the capabilities, what largest supercomputers can bring value add for their research. So basically all communities from humanities to sort of that they know that there's a pan-European supercomputer, they can come with their questions and workloads. And then one thing is the LUMI is also meant for an industrial R&D. So I would like to see that also enterprises would be aware of possibility of bringing something that is basically unachievable for them anywhere in the like a commercial cloud platforms that they can come to LUMI and use LUMI for their modeling or AI problems.
Seems like an interesting prospect also. Thanks for the interview. I really appreciate it, and all the best with your research and supercomputing in general. It's a really interesting space that you're working and contributing to.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the interview. I'd like to thank the interviewees and the whole LUMI and CSC team for their support. If you're interested in the supercomputer system architecture and technical specs, you can find a link to the CSC website in the description text. Remember to subscribe. Bye.